Happy Easter! This weekend, Christians around the globe are celebrating the events that happened at the end of Jesus' life 2,000 years ago. If you're anything like me, you may have asked yourself at one point or another, why do we have to celebrate the same thing every year? Haven't we got the point already? I think it's a fair and normal question, and I think it's generally good to ask the question why and to challenge traditions we might have just for the sake of tradition. In this video, I'm going to try and defend why I think that Easter is not a tradition for tradition's sake, but something that is necessary and joyful to do every single year. The Bible is simply riddled with times in which God asked his people to practice remembering something. In Genesis 2:3, it says, "Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." So we know that all throughout the Old Testament, the law commands the people of Israel to take a Sabbath day in order to remember that God did in fact create the world. With just this one simple act of remembering each week, God's people were constantly reminded that God created everything, that nothing that happened was outside of his control, and that resting is an important part of the human experience. Not to mention, it forced God's people to trust that God was going to make the 6 out of 7 days a week just as productive, if not more productive, than working 7 out of 7 days a week. We read in the book of Exodus that the moment after God liberated his people from Egypt, that he enacted the Passover, a celebration of what God had done in Egypt, so that people might remember forever and ever that God was the one who saved them from that place. In the Passover celebration, they actually make bread without yeast in order to remember that when the Israelites had fled Egypt, they had to do it fast. And they were also encouraged to eat the meal quickly to remember what that was like. This way, generations and generations later, children would eat this meal in haste and remember what it was like for their ancestors to flee Egypt quickly and remember that God had delivered them from an awful situation. Securing what we know about the past gives us hope that God will take care of our future. In short, there are so many instances of God commanding his people to practice remembering because remembering takes practice. Because humans forget. We forget everything all the time. It's just the way we're built. For example, you can't retain anything you've ever learned in school without practicing it on a regular basis. The silly thing is that just because something is incredibly important, like the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, doesn't mean we remember it more easily all the time. It's actually the most important things in life that we need to practice remembering the most often. This is why I believe that celebrating all of Easter weekend is incredibly important and deeply enriching to our faiths. When we take communion on Good Friday, we remember the joy of what the hope was of the people with Jesus at the time, believing that he was going to conquer the government and restore peace and balance to the world. When we take the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter to remember what it must have felt like for the people with Jesus at that time to watch him die and all their hopes seemingly get crushed, creates in us such a powerful idea of the glory that's to come on Sunday. If we practice remembering what the 2 days before Resurrection Sunday was like, it lends that much more power to Easter Sunday when we celebrate what it meant for the people back then, as well as for us today, for Jesus to rise from the dead. So let's say we take a really amazing verse, like John chapter 14, verse 6, in which Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." We see here that that's pretty much all Christianity is remembering that verse. But when we take a deeper look at it, remembering that verse is more than simply memorizing what it says. In order to believe in Jesus, we have to obey Jesus. And in order to obey Jesus, we have to believe in him. If you find that celebrating Easter is becoming more and more hollow to you as the years go on, try putting your faith into action. To believe in Jesus is to obey Jesus. And to obey Jesus is to strengthen our belief in him. Jesus says in John chapter 14, starting in verse 15, "If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit." So we believe that with his own words, Jesus solidifies this notion that to believe in him is to obey him, and to obey him is to strengthen your belief in him. We need to be reminding ourselves of the truth of Easter weekend, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly, on a yearly basis. Easter is such an important part to that because that's the only weekend in the entire year in which every single Christian in the world comes together to practice remembering that weekend in which Jesus gave his life for us and proved himself stronger than death by rising again. So this Easter Sunday, I encourage you to try and imagine what it must have felt like to be one of the women at Jesus' tomb that were told by the angel, he's not here anymore, or to be one of Jesus' disciples whom he appeared to just days after he died and said, "Hey, I'm here and you've got life forever. Go and tell the world." Because honestly, those events are what fuels our actions 2,000 years later in every single thing that we do. And contrary to popular belief, just because something is important and significant doesn't mean we have to practice remembering it less. It actually means that we have to practice remembering it all the more. So this year and every year, I hope that you see the significance of practicing remembering the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ on Easter weekend.
Hey guys, so in order to put our faith into action this week, we're going to be posting on Instagram one challenge per day to help us serve others in our community or even in our house.
We love you guys.